Hello everybody and welcome to the Employment Law webinar hosted by enlightenHR, and we're delighted to welcome Andy Knox, our guest co-host today. This is not a live recording, this is post the live event, and this will be running through the slides that we did do in the live event, so hopefully everybody that's watching this back will have the same content we've already ran through. Okay, so let's kick off. What's on the horizon? I think there's quite a lot of uncertainty in the landscape at the moment around what the legislation changes are going to look like, and what the predictions are, and everyone is there's a lot of noise in the media around that. So let's just have a little conversation around what we know and what's on the horizon. So essentially, the main piece that we are certain on is in October 2024, the sexual harassment protection is coming into play, and we will talk about that in a lot more detail in this session, and we'll talk about some practical takeaways. And then the unknown is obviously the government's proposed changes to the employment law. 1 to 9 on the list on the slide deck is essentially the ones that kind of have been put out there in the bill, but subject to kind of consultation and approval. So things like day one rights, the enhanced rights for worker status, flexible working from day one, banning the one-side 0-hour contracts, and greater enforcement rights. And so it's very employee heavy. And so yeah, we're just kind of mapping that out today in terms of what we think we know and what we think it will look like. So here's what we know so far.
Yeah, so here's the map that Holly was talking about, which was the agenda that this session is going to be following. So we know, for example, that the sexual harassment protection legislation takes effect from later this month. So we're going to spend some time looking at that. We're also going to take in the issue around the right to unfair dismissal from day one. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, so that's something that we'll be talking about. And then the things that are probably already in place for you but are going to be impacted by this new legislation are recruitment and selection practice, onboarding and induction, and of course probationary period management.
Perfect. Okay, so let's just jump straight into what we do know and what we can start taking away and putting into practice and implementing. So on the 26th of October, employers must take steps to prevent sexual harassment. So the passing of the worker protection, so it's an amendment of the Equality Act already, but the bill will be there to strengthen the existing protection for workers against sexual harassment. So, okay, so what does this mean? If this is already in place, then what does the amendment to the Act mean? So what it actually does mean is it's signalling changes for the employers around duty of care to take reasonable measures and steps to prevent that sexual harassment in the workplace for their employees. And I think, that's quite a bold statement in itself, because we're never going to be able to kind of completely remove the risk, are we? People are people, and you can't kind of control their actions and their behaviours, but actually we're going to be talking a little bit around what that looks like, reasonable steps and measures, and how we kind of quantify that as a business. And to kind of dovetail into that kind of new practice, the tribunals now have a power to increase the compensation when they find that an employer has breached this duty. So not only is it obviously best practice for your employee welfare and your well-being and culture, but it's also commercially very important that we look at this, just to mitigate any risk of a future claim, and then obviously that enhanced compensation that could be added on if we haven't been found to be taking those steps appropriately in your business. So what does that look like? So what do reasonable steps look like, and how can we implement those? So a couple of the bullet points are on the screen there, but if we just talk through them. So living by your values. So everyone talks about culture and purpose and their values, but actually, if you say one of your values is you act with integrity, or you're really inclusive, then we just need to make sure that our culture and the behaviors that our leadership kind of demonstrate is actually living by those. So your leadership need to become role models, and we really need to think about that, especially in different scenarios across the workplace, I would say. So not only, in meetings, but, on social events and when you're representing the company at maybe PR events, etc. That leadership really does need to kind of live up and down in terms of your practice. Ensure your policies and procedures are compliant and a true reflection of your organisation. Anybody that's an existing enlightenHR member on a retainer package, they will be receiving shortly the 2 new policies that have been revised in light of this amendment, and that's the equal opportunities and the bullying and harassment policy. So if you're not a member, then I would really strongly recommend that you go and have a look at your own policies and just make sure that you've made sure that they're compliant and a reflection. Invest in training is a huge one on this part, because they're not putting this in hopefully just to be a tick box. They really want people to understand what the prevention looks like, and they want people to really understand the risks that are involved in this. So our recommendation is obviously to hold regular training and provide the team on knowing what it is, spotting the signs. What do you do if you've been told about one of these? How can your managers and leadership team intervene, etc. And we'll talk a lot more on training in a section. Obviously, that's why Andy's co-hosting, because kind of that's where we're leading to. But training is a really big element of this, but we need to take it seriously. Reporting methods and investigating, as always, probably what you would do if you had an allegation land on your desk pre the 26th of October, but it's just making sure that they're really robust and actually identifying, does someone have to physically say, I want to log a grievance, or I think I have been sexually harassed in the workplace, so spotting those signs and really being able to identify when you need to investigate. And then as always, continue to monitor, take reasonable steps to adjust these practices. It's going to be an evolving process. So, I think on day one, from the 26th, not everyone's going to have all the answers, but, continue to monitor is absolutely key.
And so the recommended action that we're encouraging you to sort of to take, really, once you've perhaps listened and seen this recording, is to I suppose I'm echoing here what Holly was saying, was about upskill your management on the Equality Act and the amendments. So it's providing them with the knowledge. Also ensure that you've provided all members of the team with the following. Again, the equal opportunities policy and the bullying and harassment policy. Again, making it clear the difference between what is bullying and what is harassment. And that's really then about training the whole workforce on what is sexual harassment, making sure that people really understand what it looks like, what it sounds like, so that they can then take steps to prevent and also report such matters. And again, the real kind of message, I suppose, you want to be encouraging within your teams is for them to be proactive and to not shy away from issues that they see or hear in the workplace. And again, it comes back to that point about the culture. Are you creating and encouraging a culture where it is reasonable and acceptable for people to put their hand up and say, look, this is what I see happening, or this is what has happened to me?
Okay, so kind of fast forwarding to now the bill and the proposed changes. So the 100-day plan ends on October the 12th. And up until this point, we're still sort of just discussing the potential proposals. But the day is looming, and we're thinking about that. So let's just talk a little bit more about what we think is coming into play and best practice. So obviously, how do we feel about this? When we did the live session, there was a bit of a mixed bag, I think it's fair to say, Andy. Some people felt as though, if you're doing things right anyway, then these changes shouldn't really affect. But other people, felt quite unnerved around some of these sort of enhanced rights, etc., and making it more tricky for smaller businesses to survive. So it's a really interesting sort of landscape that we're in at the moment. Okay, so obviously TBC, and we don't know yet, but one of the major proposed changes is the day one right to unfair dismissal. So this proposal is for employees to be protected. So currently, how the legislation looks is it's the 2-year mark for the length of service. and you know, we're looking at what that means in terms of if that were to switch to a day one right. Currently, it looks as though the probation period would be capped at 6 months, but again, TBC, because we're unsure of what the proposed changes will look like. So, what does that look for employers and for business leaders? So, practically, proposing these changes will mean amendments and closer management of those kind of 5 bullet points at the bottom, which we're going to go through in more detail. We're going to talk about recruitment process and induction periods. The updating of employee handbooks is absolutely key, something that we probably don't touch on in this specific webinar, but yeah, obviously just ensuring that policies and your suite and everything is completely compliant and aligned with these new changes, and your employment contracts. And then the last one, the reviewing of the probation and performance management process. Again, Andy's going to talk about that as well when we talk through. So practical takeaways. So, okay, talking about kind of what we do and don't know, you know, we're just trying to focus on actually what we can take away today that's actually really practical and will help us. So as we just talked about, you know, the recruitment and selection piece for us is a really big piece of this. And I think that kind of was echoed in the live event, that actually if you're doing this really well, then hopefully these day one right changes won't cause too much of a ripple effect across your business. So we're trying to say action this now, and hopefully it will be a gradual transition. So the actions in terms of making the recruitment and selection process more robust is obviously the smarter you recruit and select, the less likely the risk is going to be to appoint somebody in a role that isn't successful. So then again, that kind of day one right isn't so much of a big shift or risk. So the actions we've put in is to review job description and personal specification. So really make sure that your job descriptions are a true reflection of what the role is, what the requirements are. You know, have you actually reviewed it, or are you just backfilling? You know, really take an active step to think about, is this a true representation of what you need and what we're seeking? Then review your interview questions and styles. I'll kind of let Andy kind of discuss that in a little bit more detail when we talk about the considerations. But yeah, are we getting the most out of our interviews? Are we assessing in the right way? And then training and development, your training and development for your line managers on the recruitment and selection process. So putting all the practical pieces in place and then actually just making sure that you execute it really well is what we think is best practice right now, but will help you in that process. Andy, I don't know whether you want to do the considered.
Sure thing. So in terms of taking and putting those actions into place, we're encouraging you to consider the following, really, which is thinking about your recruitment process. You know, what's the most effective process for you in terms of encouraging and inviting candidates to apply, and what's the timeline look for you? So it's just getting you to just really think about, do we have the right process in place to get candidates interested? When we're actually looking at the selection process, how do you measure cultural alignment when interviewing? So again, making sure that you're really thinking about, okay, if we are going to look for cultural alignment, what actually should we be asking questions about, or how do we ask questions that establish the skills that support that? So for example, if integrity is something that, you know, is important for you within the organization, then actually how do you ask questions that check that out? I'm really interested in this concept around obtaining references, because currently I think a lot of organizations don't give references and don't seek references, but it's a great opportunity to actually find out quite a lot of information about a candidate. So it's really starting to think about, how can you obtain references that give you meaningful insights about candidates before you actually appoint them. How can you diversify or, you know, where you recruit your people from? So again, that has to link in with your recruitment process. Where are you advertising? What approaches are you taking to have a wide pool of candidates? Bias-free screening, so starting to think about actually how do you go about shortlisting? How do you remove a conscious and also unconscious bias? So what processes or mechanisms can you use? And then maybe even starting to think about, okay, hard skills, soft skills. What's more important for your organization? The knowledge that people have and the skills they have right now, or what actually are you looking for in terms of things that you can develop when you employ them? So just looking at that process.
Perfect. Okay, so if we then jump on to the next step in the employee life cycle, which is number 2, which is the onboarding and inductions. So again, thinking about making this process more robust, and aligned with your business, again, we think kind of mitigates the risk for major changes in terms of the day one, right? So the actions that we've put on screen are to ensure that your company policies and contracts are the latest and most compliant version before issuing. Anybody on a retained package will have those within their Dropbox. But if you're not with us and you're just dialing in to watch this, then if you want to reach out to us or your current provider, that would be a definite action just to make sure that actually your paperwork is completely compliant and up to date, as this is a moving feast, unfortunately. Run a quick onboarding survey for those hires that you've hired in the last 6, 9, 12 months. Look at the data, run a quick kind of survey online. How did you do? How many times did you speak to your manager? Did you feel welcomed into the business? What was day one look like? And you can make it anonymous. It doesn't really matter. You don't need to single people out. But I think having that raw data around, actually, we think we're pretty good, and then we get the survey back and we're not doing too well, actually, to be honest. 9 out of 10 people have only been spoken to once during their probation. Well, look, that onboarding process, it is not great. We need to be constantly connected to them. We need them to feel that induction is a true reflection of how things are done in the business to give them the best success. And then consider giving your employees, a work buddy. A couple of clients that I've seen have had this, and it's really nice just to be able to pair people up with somebody of similar demographic or hobbies, or just in a different department as well, just to make sure that they're embedding and they feel like they've got a different connection to their manager or people that are mentoring them. So worth considering if you're big enough to have work buddies. I think that is a massive plus in terms of the first few weeks, because it is really daunting, joining a new organization.
And in terms of the considerations, I would really actively to get you to consider really what would the best onboarding plan look like for your organization. What do you want it to achieve? What do you want people to be able to know or to do at the end of week 1, week 2, week whatever it's going to be, or day 1 or day 2? Just be really clear about what you want it to achieve and who's responsible for carrying out various tasks and activities on it. I also, again, echoing the earlier point from Holly, how many times should you connect and gather feedback from the new hire to make sure that it's working for them? And get your line management on board. When were they last trained on the induction process? Do they know what it should be achieving? Are they clear about what their responsibilities are? And also, how would you use your HR system so that if you're a retained client of enlightenHR, you will have the Breathe HR. How will you support this process, or how will that system support the process? Thank you.
And then finally, going on to the last piece of the puzzle, the probation management, we kind of, again, dovetails into the previous one. But at the moment, we're looking as though it potentially could be capped to 6 months. Now, some people have 3-month probations and then extend. So I think it all is relevant to the job and the role that you appoint somebody in, and the actual skills and assessment time that it takes for somebody to really grasp the role. But the probation management really does need to be as robust as it can in terms of making those conversations transparent, so that when we move to a day 1, right, when that comes into play, that there's that kind of caveat around the probation management. So actually, if we're doing this right and someone doesn't unfortunately become suitable during that period, then unless it's for discriminative reasons, that looks as though that is going to be sort of the caveat to the exclusion of the day 1, right? So this is really, really important. So actions to take away are to keep an audit trail of the reviews, do day 1, week 1, month 1, so on and so forth. But having those documented, even if it's, I've scribbled it on my notepads, I've scanned it over to you. Is this do you have anything to add? Just have more than just a day book and a kind of a memory reflection of, I'm sure I told them this, and I'm sure I said they were underperforming. You need to have it documented. Pre-book all the meetings in at the start. So again, like Andy said, actually, if you're a retained client and you've got Breeze HR, that will allow you to pre-book those in for the entire period, which is a really helpful tool to just, encourage you to stay on plan. I know it's really busy when the days get busy. It's one of those things that just kind of does get pushed back and pushed to the side because it's almost seen as a nice to have, but actually we really need to kind of put those in the forefront of the agenda. Speak to HR over any concerns. So, the minute there's sort of an escalation that needs to be happened, or things aren't quite going to plan, then engage with HR or your external HR. And then hold managers accountable for completing those. So never skip, like I said, but actually, as part of their objectives and goals within their roles, it should be 100% completion of all probation reviews. Hold them really accountable to actually having to do these and never dipping out and just saying, oh, well, we went for a coffee or went for a beer and it was covered off then. It really does need to be a structured conversation in the workplace, to be really accountable.
And I guess in terms of considerations, what we're encouraging you to do and think about is that from time to time, there may be situations where employees are not meeting the standards that you want or expect. So it's spending time and being confident that your management team can have those potentially challenging conversations and are clear about what the performance or conduct issues are. Because otherwise there is the possibility that poorly performing staff may then, pass their probationary period. So what we're kind of going to be getting you to think about here is, how do you record evidence? How do you record data that support those meetings, challenging or not? But what data do you need? And again, how can you use your HR system to support probation management? We had an example there from Holly earlier on in terms of all of those dates being sort of scheduled in advance. And then ultimately this question, when is an extension essential? So how do you decide how long you should continue to train and develop an individual? So it's about that decision making. How do you make a decision to pass someone or fail somebody at their probationary period or extend it?
Perfect. Okay, so in terms of enlightenHR and how we will continue to support clients, I think as we've covered off, but I'll just kind of go over, the new policies will be emailed out to all retained clients and uploaded onto their Breathe HR system. So from a document point of view, we've got that covered. We've got the unlimited advice and support from our teams on all matters. So even, as small as just something's not quite feeling right on a probation period, what do I do? We are here to help with all of those queries. In our Dropbox template folder, we've got new templates of JDs, probation review letters and forms, offer letters and contracts of employment, and a full updated policy suite. So from your paperwork perspective, we've got that kind of sorted. From August 2024, all our retained clients were provided with Breathe HR as part of the standard package. So we offered that as free now, because we really do believe in the system, and we really do feel that helping business owners has data and MI and all those tools that kind of make running a business a little bit more efficiently. We really believe that system helps. The ad hoc HR support that we offer is, helping with onboarding paperwork, right to works checks, references, which Andy touched on, how robust are those processes. So again, we can help with all that admin as and when is needed. Just reach out. And then we're offering the exclusive training workshops on the topics that we've covered today with a 25% discount. I'll go on to the next screen, so I will let Andy discuss in a little bit more detail how to book on. But in terms of showing interest, we just simply need an email to our HR inbox. Obviously, the date, this is post recording, so we will continue to honour the 25% up until the point in which we're running the sessions.
Great, thank you very much. So there are 3 workshops that we're going to be running to support the changes in the legislation that we've identified. The first is a session which is going to be running for 2.5 hours, which is designed ultimately for line managers so that they understand the equality legislation protection from harassment. Those dates will be scheduled for sometime in November. So they're going to be live online. We're looking to have sort of a maximum number of delegates at around about 12, and the same will apply for all of these workshops. With 12 people, there's an opportunity for some interactions, for some discussion, and so that it feels quite a lively sort of session. So workshop 1 dates will be in November, and then the sort of workshop 2 and workshop 3, they're going to be scheduled for the early part of 2025. So in advance of the Act becoming law, and we'll have greater understanding there of what the sort of the actual specifics around that legislation are going to be. But we're breaking these down into 2 sessions. The first is kind of looking again at recruitment and selection, and we're getting it right. So it's again encouraging line managers to really think about their practice in this area, to take account of the legislation, and to identify the importance of getting the right candidates in. So that's the sort of workshop 2. Workshop 3 is you've got candidates in place. What approaches, how do you support the onboarding probationary periods? And I describe this as the final step in selection. So it's encouraging managers to make that decision about, is this person going to sort of, are they going to pass their probationary period or not? So how to have some of those challenging performance conversations. So that's what we're looking at running, and encourage you to book yourselves on them. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you, Andy. And like we said, in terms of specifically the workshop 1, in enrolling such training would be a really active step in terms of showing that prevention. So we would strongly encourage that workshop 1 is of strong interest to you in terms of just making that proactive. But thank you to anybody who's dialed in and watched this. We really appreciate it. And if you've got any other questions, please do feel free to reach out at hr@enlightenhr.com. Well, one of the team will be able to assist, and we look forward to speaking with you very soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.